Welcome to episode 124 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director William Liu. William just finished production on his debut feature film, which he wrote and directed. It's called Comfort. He's got a lot of practical advice for anyone who's looking to shoot their own feature film, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Over on iTunes, I want to thank Stockton Banks, who left me a very nice review a couple of weeks ago. Thank you, Stockton, for that. It's always good to hear nice reviews and hear that people are getting something out of the podcast. These iTunes reviews are really very helpful. It helps get the podcast listed in more places in iTunes, so it reaches a broader audience. So these iTunes reviews really are very valuable, and they're very much appreciated. Also, if you subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, then you'll get the new episodes downloaded to your phone each week. You just basically subscribe to Selling Your Screenplay, and then you plug your iPhone into your computer and then open up iTunes, and it will actually download the podcast episodes into iTunes, and then you have to just press the sync button and it'll put it on your phone. So it's a nice, easy, convenient way to kind of stay up to date and keep these episodes flowing into your phone. I'm almost at 50 reviews. I think Stockton's review was number 49. So please go ahead and give a review if you haven't already done so. Again, they're very, very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 124. I want to mention a free webinar that I'm doing on Wednesday, June 8th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's called How to Effectively Market Your Screenplay and Sell It. I'm going to go through all the various online channels that are available to screenwriters and give you my unfiltered opinion of them. I get questions all the time about the blacklist, about Inktip, about which contests people think people should enter. I've tried pretty much every marketing channel available to screenwriters, and I'm going to share my experiences with you guys on the webinar. Again, this webinar is completely free. Don't worry if you can't make it to the live event. I'll be recording the event, so if you sign up, you'll get a link to the recorded event after it happens. To sign up, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar. And it's all lowercase, all one word. So it's just the word free webinar, /free webinar, all lowercase. I will, of course, link to it in the show notes as well. So if you can't figure that out, just find sellingyourscreenplay.com, look for episode 124, and then in the show notes, I will link straight to it. Also, if you're already on my email list, you don't need to register for the webinar. I will be sending out the information to everyone who's already on my email list, so you don't need to necessarily re-register for that. Quick few words about what I'm working on. I feel a bit like a broken record here. Every week I'm coming on and kind of giving the same update, but the main thing I'm working on now is pre-production for my crime action thriller script, The Pinch, which I have talked about, at this point numerous times on the podcast. I'm running my first casting session this week to try and find my two main lead actors. Once I get those two actors in place, I will need those actors a lot of time, pretty much every day of the shooting. Maybe one of the characters will be like maybe 10 or 12 days out of the 15-day shoot. The other character I pretty much need every single day. He's the main lead in the thing. So I want to get those characters cast, and then once I cast them, I can kind of build around that. There's a wife role, but I have to make sure that that wife fits my lead. There's chemistry between those two actors. So the bulk of this script is these two guys in a house. So I've really got to spend a lot of time really trying to make sure I find the best actor that I can possibly find for those roles. So I'm starting that this Thursday. I'll be running sessions all day. I'm also slowly filling in various crew positions, so that's coming together nicely. I've been meeting pretty much every week for the last few weeks. I've just been meeting with potential crew members, trying to figure out, what they want to do, how they can help, and getting those people on board. I'm also still looking for some locations. I've rewritten the script to use one location for the 15 days, 4 days. I kind of went back and rewrote the script so I could use a townhouse that is in the LA area that I have access to for free. So I'm really trying to just get creative, and even if it takes rewriting the script to fit the location, that's what I'm having to do, because this is a micro budget film. one interesting thing I'm encountering dealing with lots of actors is a lot of actors want to submit a audition tape. Basically, the way the system works is you send out the casting notice through this service called the Breakdown Services, and they basically send it to Actors Access, which is like a site that actors can join. But they also send it out to the agents and the managers, the talent agent and talent managers. They get this breakdown, and so then they'll start to submit. So, I mean, there's tons of actors in LA, and this is a micro budget film, but we still got tons and tons of people submitting. So then I basically went through, and they have a nice submission process where you can actually look at reels for most of the actors, lots of different headshots. So you can look at something they've done, something they've been in. People will cut together, and some of the actors will have 3, 4, 5, little 30-second or 1-minute reels put together. You might be a comedy reel or drama reel. So you can just click through and kind of get a feel for their acting style. So that's basically what I've done. I went through all the people who submitted for these 2 main roles, and it's the role of Rob and the role of Kane. Those are the 2 main roles that I'm casting for, as I said, this Thursday. So I just went through, looked at the, you look at the picture, and then you look at if the picture of them, their headshot looks like, hey, this looks like someone who might be able to fit this role. Then you click down, and then you look at some of their reels, and I'd say 90% of the actors seem to have reels online. So then you can watch the reels, and then basically you schedule an appointment for them. And so basically I went through this process with all these actors, and then you schedule an appointment. And again, this Breakdown Services has like a interface, an online interface where you do all this, and you schedule the actors, and they have a nice way. Basically, you flag each actor with like a number, and then you say, okay, I want to schedule this role, and I want to schedule all the actors that were flagged with a number 1 or number 2. And then it basically just sends out emails to all these actors in one fell swoop, and gives them audition time. So that's all working nicely, and they have a nice system set up. So that's great, and that's working very nicely. And then some of the actors have emailed in, and that's kind of what I want to talk about now. Is a lot of the actors, and when I say a lot, I'm probably going to audition, probably in the course of the day, probably 60, 70 people. So quite a number of people. So I sent out, let's say, a lot of people won't show up. So I sent out probably at least 60 for each role. So I probably sent out 120 of these notices, and I've probably gotten like 5 or 6 people responding back, say, hey, I'm not in LA, can I send a videotaped audition? And this is a micro budget film, so beggars can't be choosy. So I'm happy to look at this video audition and see. You also upload your sides, and so the actors can get the sides. I'm going to be reading 3 scenes, which are about 2 pages each. So I have about 6.5 pages of the scenes that these actors are going to be reading, and I've picked scenes that have Rob and Kane in them. So it's going to be basically, I'm going to be reading 2 actors at the same time, just to really get through as many actors as possible on that first day. And so anyways, people are emailing me, say, hey, can we send in a videotaped audition? And again, I'm happy to do this, but I thought it was just kind of interesting. I thought there was a real parallel here, because I get a lot of screenwriters emailing me through Selling Your Screenplay, basically saying, hey, do I have to move to LA to become a screenwriter? And what you can tell from a lot of these people, and not all of them that are sending in emails about taped auditions, some of them are just out of town during that audition, but I kind of get the sense with a lot of them is they're not even in LA. They're just basically, they've joined Actor Access, and so they're just submitting, and then when they get chosen for an audition, they're like, hey, can I do an audition tape? And I just think it's a sort of parallel to a lot of these emails I get from screenwriters who are living outside of LA saying, hey, do you think I need to move? And in this day and age, I suppose it's possible to land a role by sending in a taped audition. But, really think about just the logistics of someone actually showing up for the audition. I'm going to get to shake their hands, look them in the eye. I'm going to remember them, even if their audition is maybe not as good or roughly as good as a taped audition. You're going to go with the person who you actually meet. There's nothing like a face-to-face meeting. So I feel like a lot of these people, I think so again, I'm happy to see the taped audition, and I appreciate the actors doing it, but I just feel a little bit badly for them, because I feel like, what they're doing is they're trying to do something that's already super hard. I mean, getting cast in movies and TV is very, very difficult. And they're basically making it even more difficult. And I would say the same thing goes for screenwriting. Yes. Can you make it as an actor or a screenwriter if you don't live in LA? Yes, you can. It's possible. But you're doing something that's, I mean, just being in LA and trying to be a screenwriter or an actor is very, very difficult. So you take that part of the equation out and it's just, exponentially more difficult. And I feel like a lot of these people are just sort of playing, being a screenwriter or being an actor. They're kind of not really making a real attempt, sending in an audition recording. I guess it makes them feel like they're actually advancing their acting careers, again, which in some small way maybe it is. And I guess it's fine if that's sort of the path that they're on. They want to feel like they're making inroads when in fact, I'm not sure that they really are. I mean, life is a journey, not a destination and all that. I definitely get that. So who really cares if ultimately you succeed or not succeed if you're enjoying the journey? Like if your goal is just to have this cool journey and to audition and send in audition tapes, then that's great. And because you're accomplishing that goal. But I suspect most of us do. You do want to have some results and some success. But I feel like they're kind of just spinning their wheels and just sort of playing and kind of telling themselves that, hey, I'm actually auditioning for this part in this movie, when in fact, I don't know if it's really, and some of it remains to be seen. I mean, I will look at these tapes and then we'll see, the proof is in the pudding. We'll see if any of those tapes are impactful enough for me to really cast them. But, this being a micro budget film, I don't have any budget to fly them in or put them up. So, unless they can pay for that, there's really no point. And I did say that to the people. I said, yeah, listen, you're welcome to send an audition tape. However, there is no money. And some of the people said, yeah, well, then this isn't for me. So, but I think most of the projects, that you're going to get through something like Actors Access, if you can't be in LA or New York, wherever they're actually shooting, I think you're really limiting your chances of success. And as I said, the thing that's to me is sad is that they're not really giving themselves a real chance to succeed. And this isn't about like talent or luck or really anything else. It's about doing a few simple things. In this case, actually moving to LA and giving yourself the best possible chance of succeeding. And again, the reason I'm mentioning this on a screenwriting podcast is I would really push that out to screenwriters as well. Yes. Can you succeed from outside of LA? It's possible. There definitely are people that have done it. You can point to some examples and perhaps you can learn from those examples for your own situation, but it's going to make something that's already difficult, a lot more difficult. So I'd say really keep that in mind. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I'm working on, finding locations, crewing up, and doing some casting sessions. Again, the shoot date is July 9th, so I'm down till about the 2-month mark. Really got to start getting things locked up and getting things in place, because that date is pretty much locked in stone at this point. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter and director William Liu. Here is the interview. Welcome, William, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and talking with me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ashley.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little bit, a sort of an overview of your background. How did you get into the entertainment industry, and what were some of your first professional jobs?
Sure. I think I back in high school, I really enjoyed my English classes and, grasp at any opportunity to tell, original stories, creative writing. And also during high school, I think whenever we had the chance to do a video type of presentation, an original short or whatnot, I grabbed at that opportunity. I think so, at the end of my senior year in high school, I really felt, I want to be a filmmaker. I want to study this. Went to UCLA and with the hopes of getting into their film program, and actually got rejected as an undergrad. Basically, you apply at the end of your sophomore year. It's a 2-year program, so you apply at the end of your sophomore year and to finish out your 4-year stint at UCLA. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I was still at UCLA, and I was like, I should get a degree in something, and anthropology kind of was the fallback. But I still, really wanted to be a filmmaker and got the opportunity to get a degree in film and television production for my graduate degree at Florida State University. And then so I went, all the way across the country to Florida State for my MFA, and then came back to LA. And back in LA, like, my first jobs were, your entry level assistant positions. One of my first gigs was I was assistant to one of the executives over at the Sci-Fi Channel. And then I was an assistant over at a boutique commercial agency, and then made the transition into another company that did a lot of EPK, DVD extra features, and then kind of worked my way into finally kind of producing my own content in new media, first with Machinima and then Maker Studios.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me touch on just a couple
Sure.
things. I get questions from people like, how do you get those first jobs? So maybe you can talk about just the logistics of actually landing those first low-level jobs, and especially at the agency, because I think that would be a great training ground for any screenwriter, is to get a low-level job at a boutique agent.
I was fortunate enough. Literally, I think the first person who got me my gig at Sci-Fi Channel, I was an intern at the Sci-Fi Channel, and I was out of school, but he said, California law, you have to be, a student to be an intern for, to get school credit legally. So he said, hey, look, I do this all the time. Just, sign up at Santa Monica Community College, and you can, I have this kind of special designated community college internship course, sign up as a student there, and then, we can hire you as an intern, or, we can take you on as an intern. And after interning for a few months, I guess he recognized that I was one of the top interns there, and his old assistant left. So once that happened, he hired me as his assistant. So really the advice is get those internships, take advantage of when you're either in school or like kind of the side door areas, get into a community college so you can take advantage of those internships. It's a very competitive industry. So just, stand out as an intern, be happy to make those copies and make those copies. The executive who I was assisting for, he really recommended that, hey, if you are serious about this industry, you should work at an agency, just to, know all the players, and also kind of, agency, it's all about, kind of the high volume of phone calls, and just the stress level is definitely kind of a trial by fire to see if you're cut out for this industry.
I see. And so then he just recommended you to someone he knew at one of these agencies?
No, actually, after I left him, I just randomly applied to an agency and got in. Then, it definitely was, my experience with the agency was actually typical, I think, of the Hollywood stereotype. Had a very, uber aggressive, Ari from Entourage type, just, a lot of yelling and whatnot. You definitely had to develop a thick skin.
And he was a literary agent or a talent agent?
No, he was a talent agent,
Okay.
commercial agent. Yeah.
Yeah. So were you writing scripts during this whole period and starting trying to develop some of your own material while you were working these jobs?
Yeah, I think, that the fun thing, straight out of film school, you're a little bit naive, but I actually really, we'll get to it later, but I really miss that naiveness because you don't know any better. So, out of film school, you're very bright eyed and not jaded, and you're like, oh, I'm going to direct a feature in a few years. And, every year I kind of made it, a goal of mine to write and direct a short of my own, while balancing the day-to-day, job to pay the bills.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about those shorts. Shorts are something I recommend a lot on the podcast. A lot of people who come on the podcast, they've just done a feature film. A lot of them started out with shorts. So maybe we can talk about the shorts for a little bit. Just some production tips and kind of how you got those produced, and ultimately if you think they helped your career any.
Yeah. One of I had my first project out of film school independently of that infrastructure. I had written a feature length screenplay for kind of it was my final assignment essentially for my degree, so I completed that. And a lot of people in my class, they had the opportunity to kind of do a little trailer for their feature. I didn't get the chance. I forget why, if I ran out of time or whatnot. But I still had this completed script, and I decided let's do what I didn't get a chance to do in grad school, was to make a trailer for that feature film, which was a huge learning experience. It was self-financed, and I forget, a crew that I hadn't worked with before. And unfortunately that project was kind of never finished, and it's always kind of like, I was told like, oh, don't worry. Well, everybody has one of those projects, where you never kind of completed it and it haunted you. And I think, it never being completed did haunt me, and I kind of vowed like that will never happen again. And then so my second project out of film school, I was fortunate enough, I had applied to this, there's a Los Angeles group called the LA Asian Pacific, well, it was called Visual Communications, but they're also the LA organization that holds the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival. And they have this program called Armed with a Camera, in which they selected 10 applicants and they funded a short for them. And then the short that they funded would be a part of their festival program later that year. So I applied, and I was one of the 10 selected, and had a great experience on that. It was a project, and because of the requirements for the festival, you had to complete the project, and had a blast with that, and went to a lot of festivals with that short. And it definitely was encouraging, because after that first project, I was a little down in the dumps. I'd spent all this money and had nothing to show for it. But with this short that I did for Visual Communications, which was called Spy Moms, got to go to a lot of festivals. It was my first taste of the whole festival circuit, and it was just really encouraging.
Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the festivals. How many festivals did you submit this to, and how many did you ultimately end up going to?
Gosh, I think it basically played at most of the Asian American film festivals, and I want to say it was probably, at least a half dozen. It was, this was way back in 2005, and actually the organization did a lot of work for me. They're like, oh, we loved your film, and we thought it also would be a good fit at this other festival. I think probably a dozen or so festivals it played at.
And do you feel like these shorts, feel like they did move your career along and ultimately get you ready to write and direct comfort?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of, I approached like the shorts as, definitely stepping stones. After Spy Moms, I did a much longer short, and unfortunately quite too long. It was a 30-minute short, which was a very difficult length to program. But yeah, I think, shorts are, it's weird that, unfortunately the market for shorts I think is quite limited, but they definitely, it is a great training ground. It's about, the relationships you form with your crew members and your cast members. I think the biggest thing is, just forming those relationships, because when you're making your first feature, there's a lot of risk involved, and you really kind of want to minimize that risk with, known quantities like, crew members or cast that you've
Mm-hmm.
worked with before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then yeah, like the short I did after Spy Moms, which is a 30-minute long action short, was very ambitious, but definitely after filming that one, I felt, well, this was pretty difficult, but I think I'm ready now for a feature.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was definitely. I think they've always been helpful.
Yeah. So let's dig into Comfort for a minute. Maybe to start out, you can just kind of give us a log line or pitch of the film.
Sure. Comfort is about a late night courier who does all these night deliveries all throughout Los Angeles. And one night he does a favor to one of his clients, and he picks up his client's daughter from LAX, and they go on a whole bunch of food adventures across 2 nights in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. So where did this idea come from?
I think I just the night has always intrigued me, and one of there are a lot of films that I've enjoyed, like Before Sunrise, when you're on traveling in a foreign country and meeting a stranger, and I'm also a big fan of an old John Landis film called Into the Night with Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Pfeiffer, and just that, driving out one night and meeting a stranger. Those kind of movies excite me, and I wanted to do a similar story.
Okay. And was there anything specific, like, to your background? I mean, one of the key sort of story elements is the guy is allergic to the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something you had experience with? You know people with this condition?
No, it actually just began as just I really wanted to set a film predominantly at night. I was I think for the early drafts, when I was actually in between work, I just remember kind of just being on a very weird, almost nocturnal schedule, and probably unhealthy, just eating out very late at night, being a bit of a night hawk. So I really wanted to set a film at night, and I think that idea of someone allergic to sun stemmed from needing a character narrative excuse to set a film predominantly at night.
Okay. So let's talk just a little bit about your writing process. I'm just always curious to kind of see how writers approach, screenwriting, and maybe take us through this script specifically. How much time do you spend like outlining your story versus actually, opening up final draft and writing scenes?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's funny because I think my writing process, in a sense, the entire writing process for me mimics the entire making of a film process, if that makes any sense, in the sense that there's a lot of pre-production time, development time, but then the actual physical production is relatively short comparatively. So the first draft was written years ago, like I think in 2008, and I had literally just read Vicky King's How to Write a Screenplay in 21 Days. It didn't take me 21 days, but it was definitely a very accelerated schedule because I did force myself to write every day, as every writer should. But that draft was terrible, and then it was only resurrected. Huge major development or serious development or revision of the script occurred 3 years ago, and I think I spent most of the time was spent outlining. I do believe in outlining. It's a great roadmap and fallback if whenever you find yourself stuck. So I spent a huge amount of time outlining, and then but the actual when it comes to sitting down to final draft, that process is relatively quick. I feel for me I devote the most time into the outlining, figuring out structure.
Mm-hmm. And what is a day, once you actually start writing, what does a day look like for you? How many hours a day do you typically write, and how many pages would be a good day for you?
That's a great question. It really varies. I think I get because like I think the big thing for me is like writing, and it's funny because I'm writing a book that on the reflections on what I learned on the making of comfort. But I always make the analogy, writing's a lot like running, and you just need to kind of develop the habit of forcing yourself to write, to sit down and write, and also to run, because when you're when you're not it's that startup inertia that's very difficult to overcome. And then for me, I think when I start out, it's I can just do maybe a few pages at a time, but then once the project starts taking an inertia of its own, when you get that to that great point where characters do start writing themselves, and you start plowing through because you realize, oh, there's a great scene that I want to get to that's just like it's two scenes after this next scene on my outline. Yeah, I can maybe do 20 at a time. But yeah, but it's like running. You build up to those moments, because at first, it's like, after running a mile, you're pretty gassed. But, once you start running, for a mile at a time, you can build up to, 3, 4. So yeah, for me, it started out slowly, I think. And then, but, towards the end, you're racing towards the finish.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is an independent film, and I just wonder how much budget considerations came into play while you were writing this. Did you know you were going to direct it? Did you know sort of roughly what the budget was going to be, so you had to, make some choices that way? Or was it just when you start out writing, you just write it and then cut it back as you start to get closer to production?
Yeah, I think I was definitely budget conscious. I think it's funny. And that was a lesson, I think, that I learned way back in film school, where our professors would always kind of ingrain into us, like, be conscious, be wary of scope. You cannot do a gigantic historical epic, in film school when you have to do a 5-minute short. So I was definitely budget conscious. And especially my first time out, I didn't want to do, a sci-fi extravaganza, or, a historical epic that, called for thousands of extras or whatnot. So I remember actually, when I was living in West LA, I had a neighbor who was a screenwriter at the UCLA professional program, and he had this piece of paper over his computer, and it was, on one line it said simple story, and then the arrow pointing down to complex characters. And I thought, and that always kind of resonated me, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I think for my first time out, let's hopefully tell a very simple boy meets girl story, but infuse it with these 3-dimensional characters.
One of the questions I get asked all the time, because again, I'm kind of pushing people, hey, write something low budget, go out and do a short. Mm-hmm. I'm a big proponent of that. And so one question I get is, well, how do you know how much your film is going to cost? And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, and just give us some tips for how people can estimate, what their film's going to cost. And even some practical stuff like, hey, these things are expensive. And maybe there's even some counterintuitive. Obviously, we kind of all know big stadium scenes, or as you said, period pieces. Those are going to be expensive. But maybe there's some counterintuitive things that you found, especially with this movie, that these things were actually very easy to shoot, while these things you thought they were going to be easy, but they ended up being expensive or more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's actually a great question, because it's really funny, because I was telling Mark Heidelberger, my producer, a lot of times, like, oh, why is this film so expensive, or why is it so complicated? I thought I was just telling like a simple first date movie, boy meets girl, and Mark pointed out, it was like, yeah, but you've got so many locations, Will, and I think that was the one joke he told me, like, yeah, maybe next time just set your film in one location, like a bunch of bank robbers, a bunch of thieves, like, get stuck in a vault. So locations, is one big thing that you can, kind of reduce your costs if you keep it to a handful of locations or one. The biggest thing that actually Mark mentioned to me is like, the easiest way to cut your budget is cut shooting days, because every day of your production, you've got 30 or 40 or so cast and crew members to pay and feed. So if you can reduce those, that's one easy way of cutting your budget. Of course, once you start cutting days, your page count increases. And, we had a relatively short schedule. I think, we shot basically over 16 days. But we still had a, relatively high page count, about 10 pages a day. And I think, maybe we even went up to 20 on one odd day. But I think, on average, it was around 10 pages a day.
Wow. Yeah. And I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Obviously this took place almost entirely at night. I just had a friend that got done a shoot, and his movie was a lot of night stuff too. And he said to me, I'm never doing a night shoot, because it's basically like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day. Does that increase the cost? Do you feel like that increased the cost? Does it just make it more difficult for the crew because everyone's kind of, working in the middle of the night? How do you feel about that after doing essentially a movie that was all at night?
Yeah, it definitely is tough. I will say that, Mark actually scheduled the film pretty smartly, and because we did have some day scenes, and we also did have was we had some interior scenes that you couldn't tell whether needed to be day or night. How Mark scheduled our film was we actually started out our work week. We had a 5-day work week, but for the first few days we did start at a normal hour, like 9 a.m. 10 a.m. call time, and then because of turnaround, and then also because of our night scenes, we transitioned slowly into those 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. call times. And I will say, by the end of the week, you are pretty fried. It is tough. I mean, the sad adage is, the leading cause of death in this industry isn't drug use, surprisingly, but it's people falling asleep at the wheel, because they've worked so long and just fall asleep at the wheel driving back from set. So it is tough. I don't know if I would do it again, in terms of setting a film predominantly at night. It is very physically taxing.
Yeah. And just exactly what you mentioned, I did notice watching the film, there is a ton of just different locations. When you were writing this, did you have these locations in mind? Were some of the locations like, I have a friend that has this location, so I know I'll be able to get that location easily? Or was it just you wrote it the way you felt it should be wrote, and then after the fact went and actually had to track down these locations?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, I have a house, and I knew that we could use that as one of our locations. And then no, but the other locations we pretty much scouted and found, and fortunately enough, the area that I lived in hadn't been affected too much already by what I call the CSI phenomenon, where CSI has shot there, and they were as a huge hit on CBS television, they're able to pay extravagant location fees. But most, if not all, of the locations that we used were relatively reasonably priced, and gave us a great deal to shoot.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your distribution plan for this. Have you started to submit to festivals and get it out there? Have you started to contact distributors?
Yeah, we've submitted to festivals, and got into like 4 now. So we're knee deep in the festival phase. My producer has compiled a list of distributors that he knows, and then we've also received inquiries ourselves, and then I think we will we're keeping track of all of them, and we'll plan for a distributor screening, I believe later this year in the summer, hopefully.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And I always just like to start to wrap up the interviews by asking how people can see the movie. Do you know what kind of a release schedule you may be looking at? It sounds like it's going to be a ways down the road before people can see it, but maybe even some of these festivals, you can talk about them when they're playing, and maybe people can catch those.
Sure. I think the best, check out our website, comfortmovie.com, where we have all our, screening news and whatnot. In terms of, festivals, basically right now in late April and early May, we've got a couple festivals coming up: the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, the Disorient Film Festival in Oregon, and then the second annual Bentonville Film Festival in Arkansas. And then right now, we're just waiting to hear back from the other festivals that we've applied for.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And then the final bit of business is just if you have a Twitter account or a Facebook page, anything you feel comfortable sharing, so people can just kind of keep up with what you're doing, and maybe even mention if you have a Twitter or Facebook account for the movie, we can get that. I'll get everything rounded up into the show notes so people can click over it, but you can just tell us now.
Yeah, we do have a Twitter account. It's also Comfort Movie, and then we also have a Facebook page, and that one is facebook.com/comfortfeature. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
Yeah.
And as I said, I'll get all that stuff and round that up into the show notes so people can find that easily. William, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me. I watched your movie last night. Very well done. I really enjoyed it, so I wish you all the luck with it.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
So perfect, perfect. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations. It's $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide an analysis on features and television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects and you've written up a short treatment, this is a good way to figure out which ones maybe have the most market potential. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this service to the analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on Selling Your Screenplay. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your script at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Daniel Zerilli. He's another real hustler who's making a ton of movies. He's writing, producing, and directing films. Look him up on IMDb. He's done more than 10 movies in the last 5 years, and he's very open to reading material from new writers. In fact, he gives out his email address on the show and invites writers to submit pitches to him. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with William. I hope his story is inspiring to you. I mean, he's another great example of a guy who's out there just making things happen for himself. He's doing shorts. He did a bunch of shorts. Now he's done a feature film. My guess is he'll just continue to work on projects and continue to push stuff out there. And that's really all any of us can do. I thought it was a great point about doing shorts that he made, and it's not something that I've really spent a lot of time talking to. I'm obviously a big proponent of doing shorts if you're a screenwriter starting out writing a 5-minute short film, going out and shooting it with your buddies, even if that means shooting it on your iPhone. I'm a big proponent of this for a whole variety of reasons, but I really like one of the things that William mentioned, and that was in that you build relationships with the various crew positions. That is so important, and that's really just another great benefit. Obviously, if you're a writer and you get it in the hands of a director or producer who goes and directs or produces this short, obviously you're networking with those people, but you're also potentially, if you can be on set, you're networking, especially as a director, you're networking with these other crew positions, the sound guy, the camera guy, the craft services person, the grip, the assistant camera people, the PAs, everybody that's involved with the production. You are getting to know them, and that's going to be just very, very valuable. You're going to know who's reliable. You're going to know who's good at their job. You're going to know who you want to work with again, and that's really the key. I mean, and I'm, falling into the same thing with my own micro budget feature film. Is, I'm going back to some of these relationships that I have. I'm going back to some of the people I've worked with before and bringing them into this mix. And that's a great thing to know, because when you're doing a short, if the thing bombs, if you have a bunch of unreliable people, it's probably not that big a deal. If you never even, as William said, he had one of those projects that he never finished. And that's part of the process. Doing a short, even if you don't finish it, at least you will learn who are the reliable people on the crew, who are the good people to work with. So then maybe that second short, you actually get it done and it's actually halfway decent. Again, these are all baby steps, but that's just so valuable. And hopefully, you're building up to shooting a feature film, but just learning along the ways, learning how actors are going to interpret your words, learning how a director is going to direct what you've written, and seeing the changes that are made and the practical considerations. All these are things that are just great for the shorts. But the thing that William mentioned, I think, is also really, really important, is getting to know these crew and networking these people. I mean, once you've shot like a 10-minute short, you're an eighth of the way there to a feature film. And so having these relationships in place when you go to get your to do your feature film is really, really essential. Just jumping in and shooting a feature film without any of this experience would be very, very difficult, and it just would make the process a lot more difficult. Your chances of success would be a lot less if you had no experience shooting stuff and you tried to do a feature film. It'd be a very, very difficult process. But writing a 1, 2, 3 page short and starting at that's very manageable, and then working your way up. Anyway, that's the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening.